Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Hi/X/. I'm a long-time lurker. Never really had that much to share up until recently. But I thought it might be time to share a little story. Got a little bit of backstory first, though. I live in Oklahoma, not giving away any real area details for the sake of anonymity. But it's in the Oklahoma City area. Oklahoma really isn't that much of a paranormal hotspot, except for a few reportedly haunted places. But most of those were no trespassing cops will get you kind of places. Me and my friends are all kind of interested in paranormal weird shit, ghosts and the like. We would go to creepy places we'd look up, mostly on abandoned OK. Found a place on there that looked actually spooky, St. Vincent's. A couple of people that went there got EVPs, so we were all really interested in going. It was hard finding this place. I had to scroll through a ton of comments to find any directions whatsoever. Anyways, we all cleared out a time to go, and planned. A lot. My friends, let's call them K, Z, G, and J, were pretty hyped, and so was I. Was pretty wet outside, a couple days after some hard rain and still cloudy. So we all dressed up in dark, covering clothes, yada yada yada. Also pick-related, the wooden house was burnt down when we went, but the brick building was still standing, and that's where shit went down. Now, as you can see, it's a pretty spooky place. I read that it was a Catholic home that was built in the 30s or so to house people whose families couldn't take care of them anymore. Mentally challenged, mentally ill, old, etc. Anyways, it closed down sometime in the 80s. Read a report that a nurse choked 2 patients to death before being caught and diagnosed with a mental illness. Sounded like the perfect place to go. So we got into an outfit and jumped into G's van. It was quite a ways away from where we lived, so it took about 20 to 30 minutes to get out there. But when we did, man, that was creepy. Talking about chills down the spine from looking at it. That was just the appearance, though. I'm a pretty strong-willed guy and don't get scared that easily. So we eventually piled out of the van and got our weapons. I had a stick. Kay had a brass knuckle knife. G had laser pointers. I don't know why. J was G's girlfriend, so she didn't really have a weapon. And Z was pretty cocky, so he had his fists. Took us a little while to get in. I split off with Z, I think. Don't really remember. We took a board off one of the windows and climbed in. Almost cut myself on broken glass. The others went in the completely unboarded back door, and met us in the hallway. Don't really have any sketching stuff, but I'll try to draw a layout of the building in a second. Anyways, so we meet up, and we start wandering through the place. Really creepy atmosphere inside. Not like most people say something was watching me, or holy shit, the air was thick. It was just because we were inside an abandoned building we expected to be haunted. I had a pretty bright flashlight, so I took the lead. We hit the rooms first so we wouldn't piss off some homeless dude we didn't know was there. Nothing much in downstairs rooms. The place looked torn apart. Next, we hit the little chapel-like area. I suspect it was a chapel, because it was a nice wide-open area. And at the end, there were a couple steps up to a really small stage. The altar, I guess. Anyways, I got bored of that room. So we walked down and went into the cafeteria. I call it the cafeteria because there was a little bar there, and it looked reasonably large enough for the number of rooms in the building. Anyways, K and Z wander off, so me, G, and J are just chilling, smoking cigarettes, looking around. I found a little hallway that led outside, with 4 rooms attached. Nothing really noteworthy. But in the further right room, there was a bird flapping around and making a little noise. Flew straight past my head when I walked in the room, and I reasonably almost shit my pants until I noticed it was a bird. I started walking back and was halfway through the cafeteria area when I heard K yell. So me, G, and J went to investigate. K was in the hallway, looked pretty spooked. There was a pallet laying on the ground next to him, like the kind you use to move shit around on a forklift. He told us what happened, and it went a little like this. He was just walking through the hallway right outside of the cafeteria when this pallet that was previously leaning on the wall in the hall We all split out of there after wandering upstairs a little while, smoked a couple more cigarettes. Nothing really happened. Z, turns out, got an EVP on his phone, real muffled and couldn't tell what it was saying, but definitely not a natural sound we remember hearing. Anyhow, later that week, me, Z, and Kay all went back in Kay's car. Here's where parts start to get a little freaky. We went straight upstairs, as that's where we got the EVP. It was the room all the way down the hall, next to the exit, labeled Activity Room. While heading down towards the room, got a kind of creepy vibe, just a little tingling on the back of my neck sort of thing. We stood there talking to nothing for a little while. We started to head back down the hall a little disappointed. I was about to the first room by the stairs when I heard a really loud "fuck" from K and Z. Now, K had been taunting whatever was there a little bit. "You're weak, blah, blah, blah." That kind of shit. So I turn around, and they're just standing there, spooked me out. I walk back down, and K says, "Fuck, man. Something just threw a rock at me." Holy shit. He was spooked as well. So we decided to stay a couple more minutes, then leave. Went back after a couple more days. Curiosity was killing us. Brought my GF, let's call her JA, along. JA is a huge wuss and can barely watch scary movies without burying her face in my neck. Needless to say, it was quite an exciting trip. We walked straight upstairs like last time. Nothing happened after about 10 minutes. So we went back down to the cafeteria area. Me, Z, and K were all smoking cigarettes. It should be of note that the stick I was carrying was a really short, straight cylinder, about 4 feet long. Just bought it for, poke the homeless 2K13. Just kidding. Anyways, back to it. The previous visit, I had stabbed an indention in a beer can that was on the floor of the cafeteria, and I had to focus to do that, so the spot was pretty well marked in my memory. This time, we all heard a can shuffling noise, obviously that beer can, so I pointed my flashlight. No shitting. The can was about 2 feet from the spot I had prodded and made an indention in it. It was in the exact same position, just a different spot. It wasn't that huge of a thing, though, so we opted to go back upstairs. Hit up the activity room, started walking back as a group this time, when all of a sudden we hear a thump. Look behind us, rock sitting straight in the middle of the hall. K, was that rock there before? No way, man. That's a white rock, we would have noticed that. Needless to say, pretty startling. Another 10 minutes in activity hall before we started back again. Once more, a rock. But Kay said he felt like it was aimed at him, considering we all looked back, and there was a new rock about a foot back right behind him. Now, keep in mind, this building was in shambles, might as well have been condemned. That rock didn't, spooky rock appeared from nowhere. There were rocks and shit in all of the rooms and on the sides of the hall. Just none in the middle of the hallway unless it was large piles. Now Kay, the genuinely intelligent being he is, decided on this comment. It's a ghost strong enough to throw rocks. Probably too weak to do anything else, though. Well, nice job, jackass. We all went home, and after a few more days, G and J decided they wanted to come with us again. So we all piled in G's van, weapons in hand, and rolled out. Got there. Nothing out of the ordinary. Except, I should say, we checked out the second room, top floor, on the near side, and there was a blanket and sheet kind of sprawled across the mattress in the room. When we walked in this time, the blanket was wadded up on the floor. Easy explanation, homeless. But I don't know what kind of homeless guy just does that to blankets that he obviously uses a lot. Anyways, we go back down to the activity room, and I shit you not, there is Latin scratched into the wall. Not carved, not written, scratched. I could barely get that deep with my pocket knife, let alone fingernails. And what it said was unsettling, to say the least. Only Latin I remember from it was sum non infirma, but the whole thing roughly translated to, I am not weak, leave or suffer death. Now, it could have been some smart-ass homeless dude trying to protect his turf, but that seems like the least likely explanation in the world. G set up some rocks and left them there, hoping next time we came they might be disturbed or some shit. But needless to say, after a few videos and a couple pictures, We split out of there real quick. Curious thing, though. We all watched the videos Z took and checked out his pictures. But he stated that apparently at 5 a.m., he woke up to a weird noise from his phone, checked, and all 3 videos had been deleted throughout the night between 1 and 2 a.m. They were replaced with just black videos, presumably from his camera, with just static in the background. They were about 2 to 6 minutes long each. Now Z could very well have been bullshitting, considering he has a history of it, and it seems kind of far-fetched, but at the time it was creepy. We decided to go back, against warning, and shit got a little heated. It was just me, K, and Z again. And again, the first spot we hit was the activity room. I've been calling it that just because it was the room with the Latin, and it seems to be the center and source of all the rocks thrown and otherwise spooky shit. We're walking back down the hall after hitting the room, and we hear a tumbling, like a plastic pipe rolling over cement. We look back, and from out of the laundry chute room presumably, because it was on this side of the pile of rubble. But there was a water bottle, plain and clear as day, that was definitely not there before. We were pretty creeped out, but me being the one who does not give a damn, was like, let's stay and check it out some more. Maybe we'll get some more shit. So stumbling around more, walking back towards the activity room, when behind us, a huge piece of plaster just thuds into the floor behind us. I'm pretty rational about these sort of things, and considering it was plaster, I looked all around the ceiling for a place it could have dropped from. Not one spot missing plaster except a doorway about 7 feet from that spot. And that thing thudded. Hit the floor so hard it actually mushed up on the floor. Pretty spooked, but I convinced K to stay, because it seemed like all this was being directed at him. Another rock was thrown about 10 minutes later, a rather large one. Less spooked this time, because it didn't seem to be aimed. I, not thinking about it, prodded it with my stick and broke it into 2 pieces. We plodded around the building some more for about 20 minutes, when we decided to go back into that hallway. Walking down towards the activity room, about 5 feet away from the door, when we hear a thud and roll from behind us. Sitting in the hallway, the smaller piece of the rock I broke in half. K's nearly shitting his pants at this point. I and Z are a little on edge, so we decide to split out of there. We stay away from the place for a couple weeks, doing a little research. Turns out throwing rocks, rolling things, violence in general, doesn't happen with normal residual ghosts. And thinking back to Abandoned OK's EVP, which said, and I quote, "He won't let us leave." Dug up some info that apparently demons like to lord over ghosts to suck energy from them and make themselves feel like big bosses, apparently. And another sign of a demonic haunting, violence. Read this to K, and I could almost see the stains on the seat of his pants. Couldn't dig up anything about the writing on the walls, but I felt like that was really specific, so it wouldn't necessarily be covered in general signs of a demonic haunting. And I'm too lazy to read a book on the subject. Also turns out, besides Miss Murder Nurse, over the years since it shut down, a few unidentifiable bodies have been discovered at the site, which makes me feel really lucky to be alive, I guess. We went back a couple more times, still got rocks thrown, but it was mostly the same old shit. K thought he heard somebody whispering gibberish in his ear while he was about 7 feet back from Z and I, once, but I blame it on him being scared shitless. Most recent time we went, the building was completely boarded up, no entrance, no exit anywhere. I actually had to use my stick and break open a portion of a barrier so we could get inside, while the building was partially flooded. That was a trip. The air felt a little bit spookier than usual, and that time a piece of tile was thrown that actually cut K's elbow. But other than that, nothing else has really happened there. Haven't been in a few months, thinking about going back, but I live out of the city now and I'm lazy. What do you guys think? Well, there's not much more I can really say. Z searched it up, thinking it was a demon called Furfur. What the fuck kind of name is Furfur for a demon? I'm thinking about buying a GoPro and going to take another trip around the building. K said he had a dream about it, so he bought some sage and saged the place before the last time we went. Sage didn't really work, got a couple more rocks thrown at us, but nothing really violent happened. I'm just worried that the shithead is going to start throwing rocks at me for wearing a dumb-looking camera on my head. Anyone else that's lurking can feel free to post their demon stories if they have any.
Hey/X/, I don't know if this story meets your requirements or whatever, and I don't know if it'll be spooky enough for you, but the one thing I can say in its favor is that it is absolutely genuinely true. I know most posts here start like that, but this is something that genuinely happened, which I thought I'd share with you. So I was teaching English at a school in Thailand over the summer. One day these boys come up to me and yell that they saw a ghost in the school. Thai people adore ghost stories, and the kids often stayed after dark at the school to play games or prepare for events. Thai schools have events, competitions, and sports days like twice a week, so this didn't really impress me. Especially when they mentioned the ghost had been a girl in a school uniform, I immediately realized there had just been a girl staying late when they had been there. Apparently she ran down the corridor, past the room they were in. Seemed reasonable for the way Thai kids got on in the school. I promptly forgot about it until a few days later, when one of the teachers told me he had seen a ghost. When he described a similar figure, I put it down to the rumor traveling through the school. A few other teachers told me they'd seen it. A girl in white running around the football pitch at night. Some of them mentioned the school uniform, which I thought was proof they were repeating a rumor, since it'd be hard to spot something like that at a distance. The person who spoke most English at the school was the assistant director, and one day at lunch I mentioned the ghost stories to her, since we'd been talking about how Thai people love ghost stories. She told me amusedly that before she'd joined the school, a kid had actually died on the school grounds. I was pretty interested and asked what happened, but she said she didn't know, and told me to go ask a certain teacher who'd been there at the time. I couldn't really remember the name and I didn't know who it was, so I didn't. But I told the story to one of the other foreign teachers, a Filipino guy who also spoke English, unlike most of the Thai teachers. This guy, unlike me, was good at remembering all the teachers' names, so he made inquiries on my behalf to get more information, since we were both interested. The teacher turned out to be an old, thin, joyless woman I'd often seen about the school. She seemed stern with the students, and being old, she spoke little or no English, so I tended to avoid her. I didn't even know what she taught, but it turned out it was PE, and it turned out that the kid who had died was in her class at the time. She'd been running laps of the football pitch with everyone else, and then suddenly had a heart attack. I don't know what you'll make of this story, but it's a real-life, actual, factual ghost story that genuinely wasn't made up for /X/.
Do you think she's real?
I was living in the school grounds and I went looking for her a few times, but it was genuinely too spooky for me, particularly going into the classrooms in the dark, so I never saw her myself. But ghost stories are so prevalent in Thailand that I did start to wonder if maybe there isn't something to it, even just limited to that area somehow. What I also thought was interesting was the way they described her. The fact that she wasn't in traditional Thai dress was interesting, since that's how they usually frame ghost stories. Also, I thought it was interesting that they all said she was running, because the assistant director showed me lots of ghost stories and drawings, and they always showed female ghosts not having legs or feet, which makes it weird that someone would make up a story where that wasn't the case.
That's pretty interesting, OP. Thanks for the story. I have never seen a ghost myself, but I got a school story too. My school used to be a hospital a century ago, and being relatively close to the sea in a local port, it was used by Navy soldiers that fought a war against a neighboring country even a longer time ago. That's excellent spooky boogie material. So there were lots of ghost stories around, and many students could tell personal experiences. But that was not all. It was not that uncommon for students to stay until late every once in a while for organized activities, such as plays and stuff, which would almost always be rehearsed in classrooms and end up being acted for the public in an auditorium. The hospital's emergency room used to be where the auditorium is now, and if you asked the janitors about ghost stories, they would say weird things can be heard all over the place, but can only be actually seen in the auditorium at night. They didn't seem scared of it though. They just treated it respectfully and cleaned the place only in groups. The place was always locked when not in use, and people weren't allowed to go in unless it was a big group. Even if being accompanied by a teacher, no group would be allowed if there were less than 10 people. Except the janitors. I think they could go in with smaller groups. I could tell lots of stories about things happening in the auditorium, Some I have witnessed myself, like wood burning or a seism that was only felt inside, but they all could be alluded to something else, and I have never actually seen an apparition. What I found the most scary is that the auditorium wasn't always there. It used to be in what was an operation room back in the hospital days, but it was moved, and that terrain isn't used at all anymore, and hasn't been for at least 40 years. It was kind of scary, not only considering the old location is just as big, and maybe even better located in relation to the school entrances, but also seeing the school growing vertically, even acquiring lands to make new buildings, but not messing with that square of land no matter what. It made my friends and me wonder how bad things could have been in that old place. I visited my school earlier this year to meet with my old mates, and there's a new principal. Last one was a couple that kept the position for almost 50 years. So I'm a bit curious about what he will do with that abandoned terrain.
So I thought I might share a few things with you. /x/. Growing up, I lived in an extremely old farmhouse. I just moved out recently, which is partially why I feel so comfortable typing this up. Lots of stuff happened and not in a distinct timeline, so I'm just going to end up typing this up in bursts of stories. Forgive me if it's too tame for you, but it's true. Lots of times you'd hear footsteps on the second floor, or floorboards creaking. It wasn't that big of a thing, so you eventually learned to ignore it. I remember being tricked frequently, however, by what sounded like running or walking down the stairs, to the point where I'd be looking up to see who would be coming out of the stairway. Be it human or animal, we have tons of cats, and nothing showed up. The second floor bedroom has a lot of instances I can talk about actually. For the longest time, my twin would always claim the upstairs bedroom, even though it creeped her out so badly. I would often suggest a change, but she would deny. When I asked her about the type of stuff that would happen so I could explain it to her and debunk it, she would either refuse or tell me very little. Usually, she would just feel as if someone was watching her from the doorway of the room, which was directly above the stairs. I don't know if it's a characteristic of old farmhouses, but tons of them have stairs right outside of the door, so that there's a real danger of tripping and falling if you're not careful. Aside from this, there's a kind of peculiar story she told me when she lost her glasses one morning. She said the night before, just as she was about to fall asleep, she had heard the latch on my sewing chest rattle, as if someone was playing with it. This freaked her out. It didn't sound like the latch was loose and had just fallen. It sounded like it had been opened manually. So she spent a few moments cursing the noise out, "Fuck you, you stay over there and don't come near me," or something to that regard. She eventually fell asleep sometime later, but when she woke up, there was something wrong. Her glasses were missing. She said she looked at the entire room, the bed where she had slept, in any plausible place where she might have put them. Nowhere to be found. She came over to the barn, completely disoriented and confused. So me, my mom and dad, all told her to go back across to the house, and I went with her to find her glasses. We spent another 20 minutes or so looking. I went downstairs briefly to see if she had somehow put them there, and she sat down in one of the room's ancient, overstuffed chairs. She apologized for using strong language the night before, when she knew they were only curious about the sewing chest, and asked, very politely, if she could please have her glasses back, because she really needed them to see. That was the moment I apparently chose to come back up sans glasses. I saw her sitting in the chair, looking despondent, and I sat down in the bed across from her and spotted something glinting between her feet. "Hey, aren't those your glasses under the chair?" They were. A long time before my father was born, he had had an Aunt Violeta. She had been born in the house and apparently had also died in it. My sister wasn't the only one with experiences in the room, and that wasn't her only one. I remember indulging in some nightly smut viewing, and remember getting pinched awake every time I went to fall asleep. I imagine Violeta was chastising me for not being a good Christian. In the morning, there was a series of red marks up and down my arms where I had felt the pinches. My sister had also heard someone speaking in the corner of the room, as if someone was holding a conversation and she could only just hear a burst of it. The room wasn't always so innocuous. There were times that it was really frightening rather than just slightly eerie. A few years ago, come summer, my sister cleaned out the upstairs room so it would be fit for habitation and began camping out. One morning, I came out from my downstairs bedroom and found her uncharacteristically drinking coffee downstairs ahead of me. She's generally a much later riser than me, so I asked her what was going on. She said a few hours before she normally woke up, she opened her eyes for seemingly no reason. The cat that had been sleeping in the bed with her sat bolt upright, then sprinted from the room. No stretching, no greeting her good morning, nothing. My sister, understandably wary, got up and went downstairs after the cat. No sooner was she at the foot of the stairs than she had heard a loud, inhuman screech coming from the room she had just vacated. She was shaken, but to make her feel better, I told her it was probably just raccoons. One time in particular, I remember having to sleep with her upstairs. Whenever our relatives come over, we sacrifice the nicest bedroom to them. That is the bedroom I usually sleep in, and I think in this particular instance it was my aunt. Anyway, when I come to sleep upstairs, she always feels a little better. She usually takes the bed next to the dresser, and I take the bed in the corner. Sometime in the middle of the night, I remember half waking to the groaning sound of wooden furniture moving across a wooden floor. The next morning, my sister explained what it was. She said she had woken up to the cat, same one as before, rubbing affectionately on the dresser, which suddenly shuddered a few feet forward. My sister said she had noped, but fallen promptly back asleep, and yet she still likes sleeping upstairs when she can. Aside from these experiences, my mom and dad both conclusively never put rocking chairs on the second floor, as they would start rocking themselves after a while. Anyway, there were other bedrooms upstairs, of course. My older brother and sister moved out and their rooms became storage rooms. My brother's more than my sister's, actually. She had so much shit in her old room it was impossible to put anything else in it. It was this old room that had the freakiest stories about it. My dad, whose room that was when he was younger, also hated the room. It was quiet, and if you left the door open, you could see something moving in the attic, past the attic door, which faced the room. I've always had strange dreams about this room. The room itself is a foot too short of the actual house plan. I try not to think about it too much. It creeps me out. My brother's old room had a bit of a strange vibe to it, too. After he'd moved out, I took to hanging out in it a bit. We'd put a huge old bed in it, and I liked reading up there. At one point, however, I started hearing a tapping coming from the wall beside the bed. I had been reading. It was a bright sunny day, and yet I still froze, completely chilled. I moved the bed and found a small grate affixed to the wall, from which the tapping was coming from. I realized in that instant that the grate was attached to the attic. I fled the room, never to return except for Christmas decorations, and I would always leave quickly.
Does /X/ have any experience with haunted toys or puppets? I have a personal story to share with you in the hopes that maybe someone can tell me what exactly happened to me around 3 years ago. My father is an antique dealer by trade. He travels around the UK to evaluate old estates, manors, and guest houses. Usually he takes most of the antiques he finds to auction, giving a small cut to himself and the majority to the rightful property owners, usually estranged half-sisters, uncles, and nephews who had no idea of their wealthy relatives. On occasion, if something takes his fancy, he'll buy it before it goes to auction directly from the beneficiary of the estate. He loves to collect dolls, all sorts. Old porcelain Victorian-era dolls with the glass eyes and realistic hair, goofy-looking hand puppets of bears, rabbits, and other small animals. This is where my story begins. My father had been away for the weekend evaluating a property in Brighton, an old Edwardian estate, if my memory serves correctly, owned by the prestigious Mason family, whose lineage stretched back for generations. His return is greeted warmly by my family. My mother is overjoyed and hates it when he travels away. Me and my little brother are always interested in what new dolls he brings back for his collection. He keeps them all in a large room full of display cabinets called the doll room. I've always felt uneasy being around them, and I feel like their eyes follow you around the room when you're in there. I've never had a fear of them since I've always been around them thanks to my dad's hobby. But the doll room could make anybody feel uneasy. There are close to 400 in his collection, mounted on shelves, in display cabinets, and lining every corner and space of the room. As I was saying, he had just returned from the house in Brighton. The smile on his face as he looked at me and my brother told me that he had brought something home for his collection. He called the whole family into the living room and proudly placed his suitcase on top of our coffee table and began to undo the buckles locking the suitcase. When he opened it, we were all stunned. It was some sort of monkey, a taxidermy chimp that had hooks sticking out of all its joints. It was wearing a long dress that stretched all the way to its feet and trailed behind it, large, puffy sleeves. I assumed the dress must have been white at some point, but time had dyed it a dull yellowish tinge. The eyes were pitch black and glass. There were no pupils, just dark, empty black. Its hair was tinged gray, but mostly what you'd expect from a stuffed chimpanzee, a natural jet black. The mouth was wide and fixed in a grinning position, the original teeth long removed and replaced with ivory-carved teeth. It looked like they were originally dentures, but had been crafted to fit the chimp's mouth. The grinning mouth and sickly yellow ivory teeth give it a human-looking expression. It was truly a terrifying thing to look at. As me, my brother and mother sat around the table staring at it, my father pulled out some puppet handles with wires attached. He began to knot the wires around the hooks protruding from the doll. When he was done, he jerked the handles so that the chimp moved in unison, making it wave and dance. Immediately, my mother spoke up and began shouting at my dad for bringing it home. A doll is one thing, but a stuffed chimp, it'll terrify the kids. It has to go. Me and my brother echoed our mother's sentiments and the family began yelling over this foul puppet. Eventually, my father won, putting the doll in the room with the others. It was too large for the cabinets or shelves, so it proudly sat in the center of the room on a fur rug facing the door, greeting anyone who entered the room with a sick, toothy smile. That night, the house awoke to screaming, my little brother hysterically wailing. By the time I'd run to his room, my mother and father were already there comforting him. When he finally calmed down to the point that he could talk properly, he said that he had woken up to go to the toilet. As he entered the corridor leading to our bathroom, the doll had been there, in the corridor. For the rest of the night, my brother stayed in my parents' room. In the morning, my parents argued over the doll again, my mother claiming it was causing my brother to have nightmares. My dad adamant that the doll stayed and his imagination would subside once he got used to it. Things only got worse. Every night without fail, my brother would wake up screaming. The story would change slightly, but mostly remained the same. The doll would either be in the corridor or trying to get into my brother's room. He locked his door from then on, but it didn't stay the nightmares. He claimed that he could hear the doll scratching at his door trying to open it. Finally, my father gave a little leeway to my mother and agreed to put the monkey in the attic. My brother and I watched as it was carried up, its black eyes staring down at us with an impossible look of malice upon its face. My brother, still terrified of the doll, was allowed to sleep in my room for a few nights, if anything to quell his night terrors of the doll. That night I awoke to my brother tugging at my sheets. He looked terrified and didn't say a word. I grumbled and pushed him away half awake, but he kept pulling at my sheets until I was aware enough to register my surroundings. "What?" I grumbled, tossing over in bed, and that's when I saw it. The doll was there, standing on my bed, staring down at me with black, empty eyes, its long arms stretched out reaching for me as I flailed backward, kicking it to the floor. It slowly rectified itself to an upright position. Slowly it hobbled towards me and my brother, its old wooden joints creaking underneath the skin that made up its exterior. Pressed up against the bedroom wall, me and my brother looked on in horror as it crept closer and closer until it was in our faces, mere inches from us. Its disgusting smile opened up to reveal its mouth of fetid human teeth. It leaned further toward us, glaring intently. Its mouth opened wider and wider before it spoke, a decrepit, hoarse wheeze of a voice with all the evil and sorrow of decades of torture and pain. "It's happening."
I keep hoping this thread will die, because it keeps reminding me of something I half want to post, but at the same time want to completely bury because it makes me want to totally eject from life as we know it. If you're reading this, it means I finally grew the balls to post it. My brother is a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. I hate how familiar I am with typing those words. Half of what I've done in my spare time from 2011 till now, I had been trying to understand this shit, and honestly, I am zero closer to getting it now than I was when my mother told us. This all came to light when my sister borrowed our brother's laptop and happened to navigate to YouTube. He had thousands of private uploaded videos. Some were simple internet meme shit, some were high-level conspiracy shit. The rest were so disturbingly disorganized and erratic that we as a family confronted him about it. Some of the videos were just recordings of people on public transport. Others were beautiful mind levels or weirdo crazy shit like just filming the sky and spinning as quickly as possible, or videos of him keying in numerous equations onto a calculator. Some of those were 2 hours plus in length. Some of the descriptions said things like, "I wanted her," and "for fuck's sake, what does it mean?" As of this moment, he's staying with my grandparents. We saw him last Christmas and he felt so normal, if a little sad. I emailed my grandparents about him after, and I asked if he was at all ready to come home or start a normal life. All they wrote back was no, and there's really no reason to keep asking that, hun. It made me cry for a long time. I feel like I've lost a part of my heart, even though I could drive out and see him right now if I wanted.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.